Hello, I'm Dr. Megan Hofmann.
And I'm Dr. Vicky Queralt.
We're clinical psychologists specialising in child healthcare, and we're also mums.
From our work in hospitals to our chats on the playground, we've encountered countless examples of strength and courage from families facing health issues around their children.
Whether it's going for a blood test or managing a chronic health condition, we hear about the challenges and obstacles, and we see the parents and caregivers trying to overcome them.
In this podcast, we want to shine a light on these families and delve into their healthcare stories to discover what's worked for them and what might be helpful for you too.
Hi, and welcome to episode 7 of Little Journey Spotlight Sessions.
Today we're going to be joined by an amazing mum of 4, Caroline.
Caroline's son Harry was born with hydrocephalus and lives with a permanent shunt, which drains fluid from his brain.
In our session today, Caroline talks about her experiences of visiting hospital with Harry. And she also talks to us about an amazing charity, Harry's Hat, which she founded with her husband and which supports countless children and families living with hydrocephalus.
We are really looking forward to sharing her experiences and insights with you. Hi, Caroline. Welcome to our Spotlight session.
Hi, Caroline. Welcome. So we wanted to just start off by asking you a little bit about your family, please, and also about Harry's condition.
Sure. Well, I'm Caroline and I'm a mum of 4. I'm married to Matt, and we have Harry, who has hydrocephalus, which is effectively, they used to be known as water on the brain.
And when did you learn about Harry's condition?
So Harry was diagnosed, his was quite a strange route to diagnosis in that I had a very random scan when I was 36 weeks pregnant. So at 20 weeks, the baby was absolutely fine. He just had, or the baby, we didn't know whether it's boy or girl then, had a big head, but was within the normal parameters. And at 36 weeks, they scanned him and they actually said there was a loss of brain component and he was probably incompatible with life. We were referred to a specialist hospital where they found that actually he wasn't. He had a very large arachnoid cyst, and that he would be born at a specialist hospital and would very likely need a surgery on the day of delivery. But actually, he came out pink and screaming, did relatively well quite quickly, but they were measuring his head circumference, and very quickly they realised that his head was growing. So he did have hydrocephalus and would need a shunt to effectively save his life. So he was shunted at 8 weeks old.
Wow. And I'm right in thinking that that's a permanent shunt, that is something that he still lives with today.
Yeah, shunt's permanent. So hydrocephalus is usually a lifelong condition. There is no cure effectively, but there is good treatment. And the shunt is inserted into his brain and drains the fluid effectively, or the CSF fluid, and keeps him here with us.
Mm. And can you tell us a bit about what life is like for Harry now? He's a 6-year-old boy at school, I understand.
Yes.
How does he cope with things?
He has a really good quality of life. I mean, he was diagnosed very early, so he was shunted early. And we truly believe that the earlier a child is diagnosed and treated or managed effectively, the better their outcome. And he's testament to that. So he is at mainstream school. He plays football. He does pretty much most things that a inverted commas normal child would do, albeit he's had numerous brain surgeries, and we live with that kind of sort of uncertainty that the shunt could block at any time. So they can put the shunt in, and in some children they will have their shunt and it will never block, and they'll, we know of people who are 45, 50 with shunts, and that was the first shunt that was ever put in. And then we know of sort of, 10-year-old children who've had 36 shunt revisions and a shunt revision again is surgery every time. So there's no way of really knowing how the child is going to do.
Caroline, how would you know if a shunt needs changing or the surgery needs? How does that
Well, this is the tricky thing with a child. The signs of shunt blockage are vomiting, quite excessive vomiting usually, although Harry doesn't tend to follow that. Lethargy, tiredness, just not being quite right. Obviously, some of the more acute signs, they call it sunsetting eyes when the eyes are looking downwards. That would, indicate that the child needs very, very urgent medical help. But for a lot of for Harry, it's often he's just not quite right. So it's getting to know your own child and what their symptoms are. And it varies. And obviously, I'm a mum of 4 children. We have a very busy household. We have lots of children in and out of the house. They get childhood illnesses and bugs. And, I'd love to have a day in our house and there isn't some sort of bug going around, or the, vomiting bugs and all those. And it's quite easy to think it's a shunt blockage. And it turns out that actually he's just got the virus that's going around the school. But equally, you always worry about missing it.
Yeah. How is he understanding his condition? And
he's got more aware of it. Certainly as he's turned 6, he's much more aware that he doesn't like it as much. In terms of, he's very aware that he needs to go to hospital quite a bit, and he associates hospital. He loves his neuro surgeon. He loves the neuro nurses very much. And he sees them as his people and he feels very comfortable around them. But he doesn't like hospitals because he associates that with being in pain, having invasive procedures, everybody being stressed, that sort of thing. He's and the older he's getting, the more he's becoming quite aware that he's got hydrocephalus and his friends don't, and that doesn't feel very fair to him, I suppose.
Okay. Just before we ask you about your healthcare experiences of taking him to hospital, I was just curious to know, what is it I'm really pleased to hear he loves his surgeon and nurses. What is it about it that's helped build that relationship? Like, what does he love about them?
They talk to him as Harry. They take the time to know him as an individual. He likes the fact they make a bit of a fuss of him. He knows them by their first names, and I think that's quite important. And we talk to them. We have quite an informal relationship with them, so we're quite comfortable around them. And I think that comes down to Harry feels quite comfortable. We'll have a laugh and a joke with them, and they've got to know us as a family. You
mentioned that he's had to have quite a few invasive healthcare procedures. Is this one of them you can talk to us a bit about?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's had what they call shunt revisions, which is when the shunt blocks. He's had an infection in one of the shunt sites. Quite a few times when, certainly at district general hospital level, they think it might be a problem with the shunt, so they'll go in with quite invasive, IV lines and things like that, which he absolutely hates. There's usually a discussion if we go to our local hospital about whether or not he should have a CT scan, and obviously as his parents we would rather he had an MRI scan at the specialist hospital because there's less risk of radiation. So he doesn't like the scans because they're loud, and the CT scan is very, very noisy, whereas a fast MRI is quite quick. So obviously he would prefer that as well. And there's often lots of discussion around him. He's in the middle, and it's, all the adults are talking over him about what best to do and that sort of thing. So he just doesn't like the general environment.
Yeah. And given he hates it so much, how would you get him to hospital? How do you get him to have all these procedures?
Well, if there is no option, if there is a child, if he's seriously ill, he is not in a state where there's much resistance because he's that poorly. And a lot of the time when it's routine, it's about persuading him this is in his best interest, but he doesn't like it. And as parents, we don't like doing it because we don't like doing something to a child that he doesn't enjoy doing. Your natural instinct is to protect them from something that's going to upset them. But equally, we know it's for the greater good. So we use a lot of bribery. McDonald's is great. He's figuring out the older he gets, the more treats he gets. And he wanted an England kit last time. So, he's not daft.
Rewards are brilliant, aren't they? Is there anything else that you find that you do to help him?
We talk to him, we're honest with him. He will say to me, this is not going to hurt me, is it? And if I think they're going to have to put a line in him or do something, I won't promise him that it won't, because that's not fair on him. But he started to say, you won't let them hurt me, this won't happen. And that's his way of sort of trying to protect himself, I think. And I think as his parents, we just have to be really open and honest. But we say that, nothing will happen without you being told about it. And then we talk about the things he might like to do afterwards. And he's usually pretty persuasive about what he'll get as a result of going there. So, taking him to hospital is quite expensive.
It's such a powerful tool, though, isn't it? Just kind of giving them that positive thing that's going to happen after the horrible thing. I want to talk to you about your amazing charity that you founded. Can you talk to us a little bit about what gave you the kind of motivation to set that up, and just talk to us a little bit about the amazing work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's all sort of grown quite holistically, really. I've worked in fundraising all my adult life and worked for some quite well-known organisations and done other sort of campaign and policy work. So the nurses on Harry's ward were aware of the kind of work that I'd been involved with. And we were sort of talking to them about some of the things that we found as parents when we were there. I found the evenings very, very difficult on my own with him and those sorts of things. So originally we were just going to try and fundraise for a little bit of better stuff on the ward, effectively. But talking to the nurses, one of the things we found is that if they wanted to do training around hydrocephalus, which is obviously our passion, some of them were sort of looking to fund it themselves. They were struggling to get leave. And where the hospitals could fund it, the decision-making process was quite long. So we thought we'll set up a fund that's independent. So if nurses want to, train more in the subject and therefore be better able to treat children like Harry, I mean, we did it for selfish reasons. We didn't do it to, because we were great people. There was a lot of self-interest in it. We thought we'd have this fund that we could easily support them and support them across the country. The original plan was to raise £20,000 and then have done with it, really. But as soon as we set up the sort of social media handles and stuff, more and more families were getting in touch to say how isolated they were feeling themselves. And to us, hydrocephalus is a standalone condition. So the more people that were contacting us, the more evidence there was that actually families were just like us, were feeling quite isolated. And then, like, when Harry was diagnosed, I definitely didn't want to talk to lots of other medics, didn't want to talk to other professionals. I wanted to talk to another mum who would level with me and tell me what my life was going to be like. And in fact, one of the mums on the ward, who's now one of our trustees, was one of the first people I came into contact with. And she's still my go-to mum. And I think we all have those relationships, but it's isolated. There is no like Idiot's Guide to Hydrocephalus, which we kind of wrote after that, but there isn't. And it was really isolating. When Harry was diagnosed, it was pretty much, here's some bits of paper that you can have a look at, and don't Google it, which of course I did.
Of course.
So, it didn't feel, I think as well, we came out with a few bits of A4 printed paper, but it didn't feel anywhere near relevant to the size of the life-changing diagnosis and that he had. So it sort of grew very holistically, just from people telling us what the need is.
And so I'm really getting that sense of like how isolating it was, and still is, but how important that connection with other parents and carers.
Yeah, absolutely. Our peer-to-peer work has really taken off. I think we've got about 870 families now registered, and more counting. And then the work has grown. So we found lots of families were coming saying that they opportunities to measure their child's head, they didn't realise why head circumference measurement is so relevant in terms of a hydrocephalus diagnosis. And actually in the UK, we only routinely measure babies at birth and then at 6 to 8 week check. Whereas if you look at countries like Finland, Norway, it's 10 and 11 in the first year of life. So which babies do you think gets picked up earlier? You know, we're way behind. So we launched the Get Ahead campaign, which is to make families aware of why head circumference measurement is so important and to educate frontline healthcare professionals. We've set up a petition and I just looked at it. We've got 22,000 signatures on it. And now every paediatric neurosurgical unit in the country have signed as well. And we just want the current guidelines reviewed. We're not medically qualified, so we can't say whether they're right or wrong, but we can say empirically, this is what we're seeing. Lots of families are coming through where their child wasn't diagnosed a lot later and they didn't have their head circumference measured. Or if they did, they had it measured at birth and then not again. So you couldn't spot a trend. And I mean, I'm a mum of 4. I used to, you know, part of my day job used to be working for women's refuges where we had a lot of, you know, staff come in and out to support the women. I had no idea why you measured a head. I just thought it was a nice to do. I didn't realise what the significance was. We're hoping the new health secretary might listen to us and commission a review just to make sure that what we're offering here in the UK is good enough.
Yeah. Sounds like you're doing such important work, and wish you all the best with that campaign because I would be behind you. I wanted to ask you touched on there about how you found that person on the ward who could tell you what life with hydrocephalus is going to be like. And I wondered if you could talk to us a little bit about that. How does Harry's condition impact your whole family and you as his parents?
I think it impacts us all differently. I mean, one of the things that the sort of hidden side of it is for our other children. They have, I mean, we're coming up to the end of term today. As soon as I finish this, I'm going off to watch my year 6 who's doing his transition to secondary school, and there is school plays and there's this and that, and every day there's something else. And certainly in Harry's first year of life, pretty much every time the other children were doing something, Harry would be unwell, which, you know, so we'd have to keep making changes very quickly. And that impacts them. And obviously they're older, so they can Google things, you know, and that's really difficult. I think it was for my daughter, who is now 15, I think Harry's diagnosis was very challenging because she was that age where she was old enough to understand that it could be life-threatening, but probably not quite at the time old enough to sort of understand all the implications of it. Now she's older, she can look at that in a different way. But when she was younger and dealing with that at the same time, that was quite challenging. My oldest son is 19 and has now always had a caring role for a long time, since all through Harry's life. You know, it wasn't uncommon for us to be having dinner. Often Harry would vomit after eating and he would just clear it up and we'd get back and it was quite normal. He can now drive, and you know, a couple of the times that Harry's been unwell recently, he's done the driving into the hospital with me sitting in the back, or the other day he was in the back while I was driving in. He's worked out this is quite a good way to attract nurses, even though he has an amazing girlfriend, because he will run in with his brother in his arms and everyone thinks that's very nice, and he gets tea. If I run in with Harry in my arms, nobody brings me a cup of tea. So he's figured out this is quite a good way to be a 19-year-old hero. But it's challenging. I remember when he was younger at school, he got in trouble because Harry had gone into surgery and then he'd called us, and obviously Harry had been a lot longer in surgery than we told him, and he'd got told off for using his mobile phone, but he was actually using his mobile phone to find out whether his brother was still alive. That, you know, as a young lad at secondary school, he's not going to tell them that he's upset. He's just going to take the flak at school because he's been told off for that.
Yeah.
So, you know, children aren't, particularly young lads, aren't particularly good at saying, I'm really scared. So, yeah.
Sounds like you have incredible children that are so helpful and loving and caring towards Harry, and And I'm sure, as challenging as it has been, that it must have entailed a lot of growth and having to learn responsibilities quickly and to learn about life, I think, guess quicker than most of their peers.
They're very resilient, and I'd say they're very kind children. They've learnt, to embrace friends with differences, and a couple of my children have friends who have got different physical conditions and things, and they're very accepting. It doesn't stop them from being little rat bags, and it certainly doesn't stop Harry from winding them up beyond belief. So we're not, all sort of a little house on the prairie all the time. I think we're still fairly feral, but it's a good fun.
I'd say it also sounds like you've been able to recognise how they might be feeling and the challenges that they might be experiencing, having their little brother have hydrocephalus, and how hard that must be for them. What do you think has helped them be resilient and have that kind of kindness?
We were very proud of our daughter when she was in year 7. She was quite a shy child to start, and we moved, and she started at a new school, and then we heard from her teachers, and not anything, we had not encouraged her in any way to do it, but she stood up in front of our whole year and pitched for Harry's Hydrocephalus Awareness Trust, the charity we run, to be their house charity. And unbeknown to us, she'd taken some of the charity resources in and was showing off the book and things like that. And we were gobsmacked, because she was actually quite a shy child at that age, yet it made her feel that she wanted to do something. And now we're still the house charity, so she did a good job. She became charity captain at school after that as well. So I think it's just being honest with them. We've never told them what they want to hear sometimes, which is that he will be cured and he will be fine, because that's not fair. And quite frankly, we live in a Google generation now anyway, so if they want to look something up, they will. We've tried to encourage them to be honest with us, and to ask us questions, and if we can't answer them, we will find somebody that can. Vicky, through the charity who runs our sort of family support program, she does a lot of support for young people who are effectively young carers, and Harry's benefited from the work that Vicky does in terms of helping with building his resilience and helping him own his hydrocephalus, I suppose. She does a lot of that, which has really helped.
You know how she does that? How does she help him to accept?
She's very, very talented at her job. Some of the stuff she does is gently getting them. They do a lot of activities. I can show you. They make kind of crafty activities and things like that, which I've got on my desk here. But alongside that, she gently probes. So while they're doing an activity, they will talk about anything that worries them. And for a lot of children, it's meeting other children who have the same condition. So we do, through the charity, we do a lot of family events where people meet up. And often for children with hydrocephalus, it's the first time they've met another child with the condition. They might have seen each other on the ward, but they're usually too poorly. But to see each other and be playing in the park or whatever, you wouldn't know. If you saw Harry walking down the street, you would have no idea that what's under his mop of beautiful blonde hair that he has is the shunt that keeps him alive. You wouldn't have a clue. And in fact, he's so rambunctious, you would look at him and think he's sort of leader of the pack. He's quite a confident child. He's quite accurate at football. So, you wouldn't realise there's anything different.
That's so amazing that he is able just to kind of live his life as well as possible and have that quality of life. I wanted to ask you a bit about, we've kind of heard about how Harry's condition impacts his siblings. Can I ask you a bit more about how Harry's condition affects you and your husband, and how you cope with everything that you're dealing with and the kind of risks that I guess that you're trying to manage?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got easier. I think in the first year it was really difficult because we didn't know what was signs of shunt blockage and what was just that he picked up a bug. That was really difficult. I think both me and my husband, we act as a team. I'd have to say that, but I think we certainly have disagreements in terms of I'm probably the one that's quicker to say, right, we need to go to hospital. He's more of a watch and wait, let's see how we go. I usually get my own way. But I think that can be challenging. But ultimately, we've got each other's backs and we are a team, and we know that for some bits, we've also agreed on there are parts of it that I find really difficult, and there's parts that he finds really difficult. Matt's we've both got really good family backup, which I think is really important. My dad's been quite a good sounding board for Matt as well, because he recognises that it's quite tricky for the bloke. And he will deliberately ask how Matt is, and he will deliberately phone Matt to say, how are you? Which I think is quite good, because everybody worries about the woman, but it's often the other
part as well,
who struggles a little bit. So that's quite good. But yeah, it's been challenging.
Yeah.
Just curious to know what soothes Harry most. Has he got a go-to strategy or something that he finds comfortable?
Having us, yeah, very much. He's still always is quite close, needs us, needs to know. He's very he likes to know exactly what's going to happen. So who's going to stay with him if the other parent can't stay when they're coming, and that sort of thing, and that makes him a bit more comfortable. And we use good old iPad and kids YouTube and stuff like that, and he'll sort of go into a zone and watch that stuff.
Yeah.
I was just curious to know, just going back to the hospital settings, is there things that they do in the hospital that you've noticed to make some sort of adjustment for him, to help him feel a bit more soothed or a bit more able to tolerate the procedures?
I think that's quite an idealistic aspiration, given the capacity of the hospitals. If the hospital if we are lucky enough that we are there on a day where it's not as busy, which is just unheard of, then they will try their very best. But the reality is that the wards are massively overcrowded. There isn't enough space. It's difficult. So they will be as kind as they can be, but there isn't the space. So there's very little that can be done to add that extra support. And I think you have to be realistic about that. If the shower's not working and the light above his bed isn't working properly, then the rest of it, it's always quite chaotic. And that's because in terms of where he's treated, which the medical care is very, very good, the physical environment isn't so great. So
it's understandable why he kind of leans on you to protect him through all of that.
It's noisy and it's intrusive, and sometimes there's much older children on the ward. It's you can't paint a picture of it being an ideal place to recuperate. You're desperate to get out, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, Caroline, given the amount of time you've spent in hospitals and the stress that you've been under taking Harry there, like, what would be your advice for other parents, the caregivers having to access hospitals for their child?
For me, it's about not worrying so much about the physical surroundings that your child's been treated, but that building the trust in the professionals that are ultimately keeping him alive. I've become quite close to them, and I have to learn to trust them. And building that trust is really, really challenging. I think the difficulty, and parents with children with complex conditions will tell you, when they have a specialist hospital and when they have a local hospital and the child gets treatment at both places, sometimes you just want to bash people's heads together. It's probably not the right phrase to use, but you get different advice from different people. And one thing I would always say is I would plead to medical professionals is please be respectful of each other. Because when you're a parent in the middle and you are trying to navigate it and you get somebody at District General going, well, why did they do that? I don't know why they did that. I'm not the medical professional. But don't put each other down in front of the parent, because it makes it really, really difficult to, you're trying to trust those people with your child. And when they question each other's practice, that's really, really difficult. Absolutely. Because as a parent, you're like, then, well,
yeah,
what have I consented to? What have I allowed to happen to my child?
Yeah. And so that's what you would say to the health professionals. You'd say, like, be respectful of each other. But what would you say to parents new to this situation going into that atmosphere? Or like, how would you ready them for that situation?
I'd tell them to research the condition. I'd tell them to contact us. I'd tell them to read our book, because it's first person lived experience. But I'd tell them to be kind to themselves, and it's not nice. And that's okay to feel that it's not nice. You don't have to be brave all the time. Be respectful to the people whose job it is to keep your child alive. Be respectful to the people who are there, who clean the wards to keep your child alive. Be respectful for everybody whose job it is there to help. There's no excuse to be unpleasant. However, you can be sad. And I think that's okay. And if the children are being treated in some of the hospitals that still need investment, it's okay to feel that some of it's not very nice. I think it is difficult. And I think for me, it's not comparing my child's journey. We're very lucky at the moment. Harry has had an awful first couple of years of life and has had a brilliant, last 3 years or so have been really, really good. And he's had, very few inpatient admissions. It's been a lot easier than the start, but the start was really difficult. And I was looking at other families and how well their child was doing, and mine perhaps wasn't doing as well. And why is that happening? Every child is completely different. We are incredibly lucky that so far Harry has done a lot better than his brain scans when he was initially diagnosed would lead us to believe. But that's luck. And you just don't know what the outcome is going to be. So it's sometimes just because there is another family posting online about their child's condition, which might be the same condition as your child, doesn't necessarily mean the outcomes are going to be the same.
Yeah. I mean, we hear time and time again how helpful social media and Facebook can and so forth can be with regards to connecting with communities and getting that support. But there can also be that double-edged sword, I guess, in terms of that comparison or the kind of anxieties that actually can manifest from hearing about other people's experiences, for the better or for the worse, I guess.
Definitely. I think the thing that I would always warn people against is going on some of the unregulated groups. So there's a lot of sort of, online support groups. Make sure they're run by registered charities and that they're checked, because people only post on those on the worst day and the worst moment. And then they forget to go on 2 weeks later and say, actually, everything's okay. And I can remember going on one of those groups when Harry was first diagnosed and a child had passed away. And it just threw me. Now, I the child might have passed away from a shunt blockage that was completely unexpected, or they might have. Either way, it's horrific, but I didn't know the context to it. So the minute I read it, I just assumed Harry was going to die. And that was really, it's not good for your mental health. You don't know the context necessarily on what people are posting, but I was just totally terrified after I read that. The charities tend to regulate what is posted on their online groups, so that if anything is put on that's medically incorrect or anything like that, then they will intervene. I would also say, please don't post on these things with oh, my child looks like this, do you think I should go to hospital? Don't ask other people, ask your neurosurgeon, or go to the hospital, because they're the only people that can tell you.
I like your reminder though that you're like Harry has hydrocephalus. Other people in your charity who are accessing your support also have a child with hydrocephalus, but they also have different individual needs and personalities, and their symptoms are different. And it's important to recognise that and remember that. And it's so easy as humans to compare ourselves to other people or parents to other parents.
Yeah.
But and it's hard not to, isn't it? Because that's naturally is what we do. But I love how you kind of recognise that in the importance of compassion for yourself and for other people. And
and everyone's journey is completely different. I think that's really important. I mean, we're at great pains to say that with the charity, because we recognise that Harry looks a bit like a Bowden model anyway. He's a cute looking little kid. He's actually done really well. We've been very, very lucky, but so far. But that's not the story for everybody. So he's not representative. No child is of a child with a condition. There isn't such a thing. That, you know, you can't look at pictures of Harry and say, this is how my child's going to be fine. It's different for everybody. So everybody's story is different.
Absolutely.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, and it's the difference for the child and how they're doing medically and physically and emotionally. And then there's also the differences within the family dynamics and the kind of personalities and abilities of the parents, because you've described so beautifully kind of the enormous weight of the professional relationships that you have in hospitals and how they impact on your experiences there, and how you need to advocate for your child, and you need to kind of protect them within that environment, because the hospital staff might not have time. And we're very aware that not all parents find that easy, or some might find it incredibly hard to be that strong advocate for their child within those settings. Would you have any advice for those parents?
I mean, I don't really, because it is so challenging. And I think one of the things, it's more flipping it around in terms of, I think everyone wants to give advice, and sometimes it just isn't there. It's really difficult. It's more about health professionals recognizing that sometimes people have been in the hospital for like months or long stretches, and they're tired and they're exhausted. So, one of my things was, if I knew they were going to do the ward round, I'd always try and have a shower beforehand. So at least I felt like I could, just feel a little bit more human when I was dealing with them. But some of it is learning the other side from how they talk to parents. I hate it when they come and talk to, oh, here's mum. I'm not mum, I'm Caroline, I'm Harry's mum. We're individuals. I hate it. I know students have to learn, and that's really important, and it's part of what we set the charity up to fund. But don't bring a whole load of people and then ask me if it's okay. Ask me before they all turn up. And if the students are there, get them to introduce themselves. There's nothing worse than you're there sitting down, they're all standing up and leaning over you. But it's tricky. But I think there's a lot of good intention, and everybody wants to say, oh, give this advice or that advice. Actually, sometimes it's just really hard. And it's making sure that you can say, make sure you take time for yourself, make sure you do that, but that's not the reality for a lot of people. Some of the mums and dads or carers are doing this on their own, and they're balancing this between having to then try and hold down their jobs or dealing with their other children. You can say take time out and do this, but if there's nobody else there to look after your child, then that's not realistic. So I don't really want to give advice that for some people just isn't there.
It's making me think how important it is just to sometimes sit with those unpleasant feelings of like, it's just, and acknowledge it's really hard.
But not try to cure it with things where, yes, I can give lots of advice, but that's from the viewpoint of having my husband, of I run this charity. I have the most amazing board of trustees. If Harry's sick, not one person is going to tell me off for taking time off, so I'm lucky. You know, I've got my mum and dad who are still alive as you know, grandparents. But a lot of people don't have that, and still able to come and help. A lot of people don't have, you know, grandparent support as well. Matt's got his parents, you know, who can come as well. I've got an older son, as I say, who's brilliant. His girlfriend's amazing. They can sweep in. When we were away, we took them away. And we were in France, and Harry got poorly and needed to go into hospital for a day. They're old enough to look after our other children while we just could look after Harry. Not everybody is in that fortunate position. So I think for some people it's just really hard.
Yeah. And that's where charities such as yours are just so instrumental to normalizing the fact that it's
hard. I think sometimes trying to cut, and people tried to do that with us when Harry was first coming up with a solution, and when the solution doesn't fit the family dynamic, it actually causes more problems.
Yeah, it can have more of an emotional toil.
Definitely.
We just have one final question for you, if that's okay, which is around if you had one wish for how healthcare settings could do things differently to support children in a better way, what would your wish be?
Gosh, there's hundreds. I would say it's about making it a more comfortable, more private environment, I think. But that is very much dependent on where you are treated. For other families, that might not be the main wish, but where Harry is treated, it is quite chaotic and there is limited space. And I remember trying to breastfeed on the ward, and there was a family who weren't very nice, and the dad was making rude comments about breastfeeding, so never felt particularly safe. And I think my other thing is so important is that they speak in a language that parents understand. Now, I'm educated, I've worked at senior level, and I've still come across clinicians who speak to me in terms I do not understand. And that's really, and I'm confident enough to say, hang on, I don't understand what you've just said. Can you explain it to me? And that's luck, and that comes from the jobs that I've done. But for, you know, when they speak over you, there is no excuse for that. And, you know, you then lose any sort, when you're in hospital, we lose your rights over your child anyway, because ultimately the hospital has the rights, but you lose your sense of identity, you look awful, which, well, in my case I do. You're exhausted, you know, you've got all those going, so you lose your sense of self as it is. And then if they are speaking in terms you don't understand, you become really frightened. And I think it's also bearing in mind, and I know I've worked on the other side, you know, where you see lots and lots of families, and it's really difficult, but to sometimes reflect that their every day is often our worst day. And it's that side of things, you know, we may just be a number, but it is often the worst moment. Handing over my child for surgery is the worst moment of my life, is the worst day, is the most scary, particularly if it's major surgery. And I know that's routine and that's their job, but it's recognizing that is really, really challenging.
Yeah. Gosh, that's such powerful stuff, Caroline, and it's absolutely see how vital all those elements are. We're so grateful for you coming in and talking to us today.
No, it's a pleasure. I hope that's helpful.
It's so inspiring to hear about how you've turned something that has been so difficult for your family and challenging in so many different ways into something that's been able to help so many different people and continues to raise awareness and, you know, pushing for policy changes and reviews of guidelines. And I mean, it's amazing, and I wish you all the very best. We have really enjoyed talking to Caroline today. For more information about her amazing charity, Harry's Hat, please do check out their website or find them on social media.
We also want to thank our listeners for joining us and our fabulous team at Little Journey for making this episode possible. If you want to be notified of new Spotlight sessions, please click subscribe on the Little Journey YouTube channel. Bye.
Bye.